The breaking point. The mahogany conference table reflected the satisfaction in Marcus Hartwell's dark eyes as he signed the final contract. Another acquisition, another victory. His tech consulting firm had just absorbed its third competitor in 2 years, and at 35, he was already being featured on magazine covers as one of the city's most promising entrepreneurs. Congratulations, Marcus. His business partner Jake extended a firm handshake across the polished surface. This puts us in the big leagues now. Marcus loosened his Italian silk tie, feeling the weight of success settle comfortably on his shoulders. The corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering cityscape that seemed to belong to him now. Everything was falling into place exactly as he'd envisioned, except for one persistent problem. Diana. His wife of 8 years sat in their suburban kitchen that very evening, quietly arranging white roses in a crystal vase, the same ritual she'd performed every week since they'd married. Her auburn hair caught the warm light of the pendant lamp and she hummed softly while working. Completely absorbed in creating something beautiful from simple stems. "We need to talk," Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the peaceful atmosphere like a blade. Diana looked up, her green eyes meeting his with the same gentle attention she'd always given him. "Of course. How was your day? I saw the news about the merger online. I'm so proud of... This isn't working anymore." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but Marcus felt no urge to soften them. He'd been rehearsing this conversation for weeks. The flower in Diana's hand trembled slightly before she set it down carefully on the counter. "What do you mean?" Marcus began pacing the length of their kitchen, the same space where Diana had supported him through countless late nights and early morning coffee runs during his startup years. Now it felt suffocating, too ordinary for what he was becoming. "Look around, Diana, really look. This house, this life, it's not who I am anymore. I'm networking with CEOs, dining with investors, traveling to conferences in Monaco and Singapore, and you..." He paused, studying her simple cotton dress, her bare feet, the way she stood so still and small in the grand kitchen they'd renovated together. "You're still arranging flowers?" "I don't understand what that has to do with us." Her voice remained steady, though Marcus noticed her fingers intertwining in front of her waist. "Everything. We're moving in different directions. I need someone who can match my energy, who understands the world I'm operating in now, someone who can hold her own at galas and board meetings." Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a photo from last week's industry award ceremony. "Look at this. Every other successful man there had a partner who complemented their success. You barely made conversation with anyone." Diana's eyes flickered with hurt, but she maintained her composure. "I've always supported your dreams, Marcus. I worked 2 jobs to help pay for your MBA. I took care of everything here so you could focus on building your company. I thought we were building this together. And I'm grateful for that foundation," Marcus said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But foundations are just the beginning. I need someone who can grow with me, not hold me back." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Diana turned back to her flowers, her movements deliberate and careful despite the tears that had begun to well in her eyes. "I've already spoken to lawyers," Marcus continued, his voice becoming businesslike. "I'll be fair about the division of assets. You can keep the house, it suits you. But I need to be free to pursue the opportunities ahead of me without worrying about whether my personal life fits the image I need to project." Diana's hands stilled completely. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. 8 years, Marcus. 8 years of believing we were partners. We were. Now we're not." He straightened his cufflinks, a gesture that had become habitual since his success. "My assistant will send over the paperwork. I'll be staying at the downtown loft until this is finalized." As he walked toward the door, Marcus felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. Finally, he was shedding the last vestige of his old life. The quiet woman in the kitchen represented everything he'd outgrown: modesty, simplicity, contentment with small pleasures. He was destined for bigger things, and bigger things required a bigger life. Behind him, Diana remained motionless among her flowers, the crystal vase reflecting the light like tears suspended in time. But Marcus didn't look back. His reflection in the dark window showed a man transformed by ambition, and he liked what he saw. Silent transformation. 3 months after signing the divorce papers, Diana stood in the empty house that had once echoed with shared laughter and quiet conversations. The silence had become her companion, no longer oppressive but strangely liberating. She'd spent the first weeks crying into the same crystal vase where she'd arranged flowers for Marcus, but tears had a way of washing things clean. The manila envelope on her kitchen counter contained the final settlement papers. Marcus had been generous, perhaps out of guilt or simply to expedite his freedom. The house was hers, along with a substantial sum that would allow her to rebuild without financial worry. But it wasn't money that Diana needed most. It was herself. She opened her laptop and scrolled through the emails she'd been drafting for the past hour. The Interior Design Institute's website glowed on the screen, their advanced certification program exactly what she'd dreamed of pursuing 8 years ago. Back then, Marcus had convinced her that his MBA was the priority, that her dreams could wait. Now, with trembling fingers, she clicked, "Submit application." The morning classes began 2 weeks later. Diana found herself in a studio filled with natural light, surrounded by young designers half her age and career changers like herself. Professor Williams, a renowned designer with silver hair and paint-stained fingers, examined Diana's first assignment, a mood board for a healing space. Interesting choice, he mused, studying her selection of soft blues and warm creams, natural textures and curved lines. There's a story here. Pain transformed into beauty. That's the mark of authentic design. Diana felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Recognition, validation for her vision rather than her service to someone else's dreams. As weeks turned to months, Diana discovered talents she'd forgotten she possessed. Her eye for color, her intuition about how spaces could heal and inspire, her ability to listen to what clients truly needed. These gifts had been dormant, waiting for permission to emerge. The transformation wasn't just professional. Diana began taking care of herself with the same attention she'd once lavished on Marcus. She joined a yoga class, started painting again on weekends, and even accepted invitations to coffee with her classmates. Slowly, the woman who had disappeared into her marriage began to resurface. Meanwhile, Marcus threw himself into his new freedom with characteristic intensity. His downtown loft became a showcase for his success. Glass and steel, stark lines, and a rotating gallery of companions who matched his aesthetic perfectly. He dated influencers, executives, socialites who looked stunning in photos and could navigate his professional world with practiced ease. "You're living the dream," Jake commented one evening, as they watched Marcus's latest companion. A marketing director named Vivian commanded attention at an industry party. Marcus nodded, but something nagged at him. These women were perfect on paper, but conversations felt scripted. They admired his success, his ambition, his lifestyle, but did any of them actually know him? He pushed the thought away. This was what he'd wanted. Partnership without the messiness of deep emotional connection. Diana, unaware of Marcus's internal conflicts, was discovering her own strength in unexpected ways. When her final project was selected for the Institute's prestigious showcase, she stood before a room full of professionals and presented her design for a trauma recovery center. Her voice, once soft and hesitant in Marcus's world of aggressive networking, rang clear and confident. "Healing spaces should whisper, not shout," she explained to the captivated audience. "They should hold our brokenness gently while showing us beauty is still possible." The applause was genuine, warm. Diana felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming recognition that she had something valuable to offer the world. Her professor approached afterward with a business card. "There's someone you should meet," he said, his eyes twinkling with possibility. "Theodore Blackwood is establishing a new foundation for children's therapeutic spaces. Your vision would be perfect for his project." As Diana took the card, she had no idea that this introduction would change everything. She was simply a woman who had learned to bloom again after being uprooted, ready to plant her talents in new soil. The unexpected encounter. Theodore Blackwood's office was nothing like Diana expected. Instead of the cold corporate aesthetic she'd grown accustomed to in Marcus's world, the space radiated warmth. Books lined the walls, children's artwork hung in simple frames, and a corner held comfortable chairs arranged around a coffee table, scattered with architectural magazines. "Miss Hartwell, thank you for coming." Theodore rose from his desk as she entered. He was tall and lean, with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His handshake was firm but gentle, his smile genuine. Professor Williams spoke very highly of your work. Diana had researched Theodore extensively before this meeting. Heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, he'd transformed his inheritance into a foundation focused on creating healing environments for children who'd experienced trauma. Unlike Marcus, who wore his success like armor, Theodore seemed to carry his wealth quietly, using it as a tool rather than a trophy. I understand you're planning therapeutic centers, Diana said, settling into the chair he offered. I'd love to hear about your vision. Theodore's eyes lit up as he described his dream. Spaces where children could feel safe enough to begin healing, where every element was designed to nurture rather than intimidate. He spoke with passion about evidence-based design, about how color and light could influence recovery, about creating environments that honored childhood even in its darkest moments. Too many therapeutic spaces feel clinical, he said, leaning forward with enthusiasm. I want to create places that feel like hope. Diana felt her heart quicken. This was why she'd studied design, not to create impressive spaces for impressive people, but to help healing happen. I brought some preliminary sketches, she said, opening her portfolio with nervous excitement. For the next hour, they pored over Diana's concepts. She watched Theodore's face as he examined her drawings of reading nooks designed to feel like treehouses, art therapy rooms with movable walls to adapt to each child's needs, gardens visible from every window to connect indoor and outdoor healing. This is extraordinary, Theodore murmured, studying a sketch of a sensory room designed to calm rather than overstimulate. You understand something essential, that healing happens when we feel held, not exposed. Their collaboration began immediately. Diana found herself working closely with Theodore's team, visiting sites, interviewing therapists, and slowly crafting designs that would serve the Foundation's mission. But more than the professional partnership, she found herself drawn to Theodore's approach to leadership. Where Marcus had commanded attention and demanded recognition, Theodore listened more than he spoke. He knew the names of the Foundation's maintenance staff, remembered personal details about donors' families, and treated every meeting as an opportunity to learn rather than impress. You have a gift for seeing what people need, he told Diana one afternoon as they toured their first completed center. Children's laughter echoed through the halls, and Diana felt a deep satisfaction watching young patients discover safe spaces to play and heal. I think I learned it the hard way, Diana replied. Surprising herself with her honesty, Theodore paused, his perceptive gaze gentle. Sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest wisdom. As months passed, their working relationship deepened into friendship, and friendship began to hint at something more. Theodore was nothing like Marcus. Where her ex-husband had been dazzling and demanding, Theodore was steady and thoughtful. He asked about her ideas not to test them, but to understand them. He celebrated her successes without claiming credit, supported her vision without trying to reshape it. The evening everything changed began like many others. They were working late, finalizing designs for their third center, when Theodore looked up from the blueprints and said, Diana, would you have dinner with me? Not as colleagues, but as ourselves? Diana felt her breath catch. She'd been so focused on rebuilding her professional identity that she hadn't recognized the personal healing happening alongside it. Theodore's presence in her life had shown her what true partnership looked like, two whole people choosing to create something beautiful together. I'd like that very much, she said. Their first date was at a small bistro Theodore frequented, where the owner knew his order and asked about his latest projects with genuine interest. Diana watched how he interacted with everyone from the server to the couple at the next table, recognizing a man who had never forgotten his humanity despite his success. Tell me about your marriage, Theodore said gently over dessert, not from curiosity but from the caring desire to know her story. Diana found herself sharing not just the facts but the feelings, how she'd lost herself trying to be worthy of Marcus's ambition, how the divorce had felt like dying and being reborn simultaneously, how designing healing spaces had become her own therapy. He convinced me I wasn't enough, she concluded. It took losing everything to discover that maybe I was always enough, just not for him. Theodore reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His loss was the world's gain. These children you're designing for, this beauty you're creating, none of that would exist if you hadn't found your way back to yourself. As they walked to her car, Diana realized she was falling in love not just with Theodore, but with the version of herself he saw and celebrated. For the first time since her marriage ended, she felt complete. Part 4. The Revelation. The annual Children's Future Gala was the city's premier charity event, drawing philanthropists, celebrities, and business leaders to support causes affecting young lives. Diana stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the emerald silk dress Theodore had admired during their shopping trip the previous weekend. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the quiet, self-effacing wife Marcus had discarded 2 years earlier. "You look radiant," Theodore said softly, appearing behind her in the mirror. His reflection showed a man comfortable in his formal wear, but more comfortable with the woman beside him. "Are you ready for this?" Diana turned to face him, smoothing his bow tie with practiced ease. Their relationship had evolved naturally from professional collaboration to deep friendship to love, each stage building on genuine respect and shared values. Tonight, Theodore would announce their engagement to the Foundation's board of directors, making public what had been privately celebrated for months. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it completely. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. Diana moved through the crowd with new confidence, engaging donors in conversations about the Foundation's work, discussing design philosophy with fellow professionals, and feeling genuinely connected to the mission they were celebrating. "Ladies and gentlemen," the evening's host called for attention as the dinner portion concluded. "It's my honor to introduce Theodore Blackwood, founder of the Hope Springs Foundation." Theodore took the stage with his characteristic humility, thanking supporters and sharing stories of children whose lives had been transformed by the therapeutic centers. Diana watched from their table, pride swelling in her chest for this man who used his resources to heal rather than impress. "Before we conclude," Theodore said, his eyes finding Diana in the crowd, "I want to share something personal. The design of our healing spaces comes from the extraordinary vision of Diana Hartwell, our chief design architect. But she's brought healing to more than just our foundation." He paused, his smile radiant. "Diana, would you join me?" Diana rose, accepting Theodore's extended hand as she stepped onto the stage. The spotlight felt warm rather than exposing, perhaps because she was no longer hiding from herself. "This remarkable woman has agreed to become my wife," Theodore announced, his voice carrying both joy and reverence. "Together we'll continue creating spaces where hope can take root and flourish." The applause was thunderous, but Diana heard only the beating of her own heart and Theodore's whispered "I love you" as he slipped his grandmother's platinum and diamond ring onto her finger. What Diana didn't see was Marcus Hartwell standing frozen near the back of the ballroom. He had attended the gala as part of his company's charitable initiatives, expecting the usual evening of networking and obligation. The invitation had mentioned Theodore Blackwood, but Marcus hadn't connected the name to any personal significance. Wealthy philanthropists were common in his circles. Their lives rarely intersected meaningfully, but when Diana appeared on stage, transformed, glowing, celebrated, Marcus felt the floor shift beneath his feet. This couldn't be his Diana. His Diana had been quiet, simple, content with small domestic pleasures. This woman commanded attention effortlessly, spoke with authority about her professional achievements, and radiated the kind of confidence that came from deep self-knowledge. The emerald dress complemented her auburn hair perfectly, but it was her bearing that made her beautiful. The way she stood beside Theodore as an equal partner rather than an ornament. "Incredible couple," the woman beside Marcus commented. "Theodore Blackwood is one of the most respected men in the city, and his fiancée's work is transforming children's healthcare design. They say she single-handedly revolutionized therapeutic environments for trauma recovery." Marcus stared as Theodore kissed Diana's hand, as the crowd celebrated their happiness, as photographers captured their joy for tomorrow's society pages. The Diana he thought he knew, quiet, dependent, limited, had never existed. He had simply been too self-absorbed to see the woman who had been there all along. The evening continued around him, but Marcus remained trapped in revelation. Every memory of their marriage shifted perspective. Diana hadn't been holding him back. She had been holding him up. Her quietness hadn't been weakness but strength. Her contentment hadn't been lack of ambition but wisdom about what truly mattered. As Theodore and Diana moved through the crowd, Accepting congratulations and sharing their happiness, Marcus realized he was witnessing something he had never experienced. A partnership between two people who saw and celebrated each other's true selves. He thought of Vivian, his current companion, beautiful and accomplished, but ultimately as shallow as his own transformed priorities. He thought of all the women he'd dated since the divorce, impressive on paper but forgettable in practice. None of them had ever looked at him the way Diana was looking at Theodore, with love that encompassed not just attraction, but deep respect, genuine partnership, shared purpose. Marcus slipped out of the ballroom before the evening concluded, unable to watch anymore. In his Tesla, driving through the city lights that had once symbolized his conquest, he finally understood what he had lost. He had traded gold for glitter, substance for surface, love for status, and Diana, beautiful, talented, whole Diana, had found someone worthy of the treasures Marcus had been too foolish to recognize. Full circle 1 year later, Diana stood in the garden of the Hope Springs Foundation's flagship therapeutic center, watching children play in the healing spaces she had designed. Butterfly gardens bloomed alongside sensory paths, and the laughter echoing from the indoor play areas testified to recovery happening daily within these walls. The board approved funding for 3 more centers, Theodore announced, approaching with 2 cups of coffee and the satisfied expression he wore after particularly productive meetings. Colorado, Texas, and Maine? Diana asked, accepting her cup and settling beside him on the bench they'd installed specifically for quiet moments like these. Maine requested you personally. Apparently, word is spreading about the designer who creates magic from trauma. Theodore's pride in his wife's growing reputation never felt possessive, only celebratory. Diana smiled, watching a young girl discover the hidden reading nook she'd incorporated into an artificial tree. The child's delight was worth every late night and careful calculation that had gone into the space's creation. This was what success looked like, not magazine covers or networking events, but genuine impact on vulnerable lives. I have something to tell you, Diana said, taking Theodore's hand. Dr. Martinez called with test results today. Theodore's attention sharpened immediately. Diana had been feeling tired lately, experiencing morning nausea that they'd attributed to work stress and the upcoming center's deadline pressures. We're pregnant, Diana said softly, watching joy transform her husband's face. Theodore's coffee cup hit the ground as he pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the garden while children giggled at the spontaneous celebration. Are you happy? He asked, setting her down gently, his hands framing her face. Completely, Diana laughed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Scared and thrilled and grateful all at once. They spent the afternoon planning, dreaming about the nursery Diana would design, discussing how to balance their foundation work with parenthood, marveling at how their partnership continued expanding into new forms of creation and purpose. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus sat in his corner office staring at the newspaper society section. The headline read, Foundation Power Couple Announces Pregnancy, accompanied by a photo of Diana and Theodore at the previous week's charity auction. Diana glowed with happiness, one hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach while Theodore's arm encircled her with obvious devotion. Marcus had followed their story obsessively since that night at the gala, watching from afar as Diana's career flourished and their love deepened. Every article about the Foundation's expansion, every photo of their public appearances, every mention of Diana's innovative designs felt like evidence of his monumental mistake. His own life had grown increasingly hollow. Success continued. His company had gone public 6 months earlier, making him wealthy beyond his original dreams. But the victories felt empty. Relationships remained surface level, focused on mutual advantage rather than genuine connection. He dated beautiful, accomplished women who enhanced his image, but never challenged his assumptions or celebrated his authentic self. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had everything he thought he wanted when he divorced Diana, but none of it satisfied the deeper hunger he'd only recognized after losing her. His assistant buzzed through the intercom. Mr. Hartwell, your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Marcus looked up to see Jake entering with architectural plans for their new corporate headquarters. Ready to see the designs? We got the firm you recommended. Apparently they specialize in creating environments that support innovation and collaboration. Marcus nodded absently, then froze as he saw the signature on the blueprints. Hartwell Design Collaborative was embossed at the bottom of each page, with Diana's name listed as principal architect. "She's incredible," Jake continued, oblivious to Marcus's shock. "The presentation was unlike anything I've ever seen. She didn't just show us pretty pictures. She explained how spatial design affects creativity, productivity, even employee well-being. Her approach is revolutionary." Marcus studied the plans with growing amazement. Diana had proposed transforming their sterile corporate environment into something that honored both ambition and humanity. Natural light flooded every workspace. Collaboration areas felt organic rather than forced, and private spaces provided refuge for deep thinking. It was sophisticated, innovative, and unmistakably designed by someone who understood how environments could heal and inspire. "We should meet with her again next week to discuss implementation," Jake suggested. "Unless you have concerns?" Marcus looked at the plans that represented everything he'd learned too late about true success: work that served others, creativity that stemmed from authentic vision, achievement that built rather than consumed. "No," he said quietly. "No concerns. She's exactly the right person for this project." That evening, Marcus walked through his stark downtown loft, seeing it clearly for the first time. Glass and steel, sharp edges, impressive but cold. It was a perfect reflection of what he'd become: successful but isolated, admired but not truly known. Diana had created a life of substance while he'd chased symbols. She'd found love that celebrated her authentic self, while he'd pursued relationships that validated his image. She'd built something meaningful while he'd accumulated possessions. Standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights that had once represented conquest, Marcus finally understood the difference between having everything and having what mattered. Diana was happy. Truly, deeply happy in ways that had nothing to do with status or recognition. She had found her purpose, her partner, and her place in the world. And Marcus, despite all his accumulation of success, was profoundly alone. The reflection in the dark window showed him a man who had gained the world but lost his soul. And for the first time since their divorce, Marcus wept. Not from self-pity, but from the devastating recognition of what real success looked like and how completely he had missed it. In her garden across town, Diana felt her baby's first flutter of movement, surrounded by the healing spaces she'd created and the love she'd found. She was exactly where she belonged, with exactly who she was meant to be. The transformation was complete.